Hey, do you want to make games but don't know how? Don't worry, I got you. Woo! Welcome back to Unity. In this tutorial, we'll go through setting up a game manager so we can manage our lives, and we'll look at setting up a UI manager so we can reset the game. All right, to get started, we're going to go ahead and change our left and right wall. If you select both of them or click left wall and hold shift, you can click right wall. We're going to change this to a gray just because yellow is a little too wild. All right, let's go ahead and make a game manager. This game manager script will be responsible for tracking our lives and possibly the time. So if there's a time limit for each level and what level we're currently on. So to do that, we're going to make an empty game object and we're just going to call it game manager. That way we know this object is going to be in our scene and we're only going to use it for managing the game. We can slide it up to the top. We can also bring our miscellaneous environment up to the top as well. So in our game manager, we'll go ahead and add a component and the script will be called game manager. Enter, enter. All right, now in our script, let's go ahead and delete our update and start method for now. And at the top, we'll make the variables that we need. So we talked about lives. So we're going to want an integer value to hold our lives. And the reason we're doing integer instead of float is we want it to be a whole number. You're never going to have 1.5 lives. So we can make an integer. We'll call it lives. And we'll set it by default to 3. But we could also make this a serialized field, and it could be something you customize in the editor. All right, then we'll go ahead and make another serialized field, and this one will be for tracking time. We'll make it a float, and we'll do time remaining, and we'll set that to maybe 2 minutes, but the reason we made it a float is maybe you want it 2 minutes and 30 seconds, in which case you could do 2.5, right? Then that would be 2.5 minutes, but we'll leave it to 2 for right now. All right, now with our variables created, let's go ahead and make sure that this class can only exist one time. So we want to make this a singleton. A singleton just means we're going to have one instance of this class that everything else can reference. So there's never going to be 2 game managers in our scene. So to do that, we need to make a public static, which again ensures there's only going to be one instance of this game manager. And we're going to call it game manager, which is the name of our class. So we're making an instance of our game manager, and we'll call it instance. I'm going to capitalize instance. And notice it went ahead and pre-populated get and private set. That just means that only this script can set it and nothing else can come in and try to set the game manager instance. So with the instance configured, we need to get a reference to this class. And we don't want to do it at start. We want to do it at awake. Awake is called when the script is first loaded. It's called before start and it's called before on enable. Awesome. Now inside of awake, we can set instance equals this. Now we can go ahead and make a method to subtract our lives. So this will be a public void remove life. Naming is important, so we could change this later on, but for right now, if I call game manager, what do I want to do? I want to remove a life. Okay, so go ahead and add your curly braces underneath, and we're going to say, right now, we're just going to do a debug log. That way in the console, we can see that this is actually working. So we're going to say debug.log parentheses, and inside quotation marks, we'll say, I lost a life. And then we'll actually subtract a lives by taking our lives and hit minus minus. And that will subtract 1 life from our current list, from our current lives. Okay, so I lose one life. What do I want to do after I lose a life? Well, we want to check to see if we have any lives remaining. And if you don't, then we want to potentially end the game, display a UI, say game over, etc. So for right now, we'll just make a simple if statement. We'll say if, and inside the parentheses, we're going to say lives are less than 0, because it's okay if it gets to 0. We only want to end the game if it's less than 0. So if you have 3 lives, you lose 1, you got 2, you lose another, you got 1, you lose another, you got 0 lives remaining. We still want the player to play, but once it gets below 0, then we need to do something or end the game. So in our if statement, if the lives are less than 0, right now we'll just add a comment and we'll say end the game or display game over UI. Sweet. And now let's open up our resetter script. So in our resetter script, whenever there's a collision with the resetter, essentially we've lost a life. Now that we have our game manager, we need to call the game manager and say, hey, we lost a life, right? So we're going to call this remove life method. So in our resetter script, if the collision equals a boulder, remember we're setting the position, changing the velocity, and then we're also going to, well, actually, let's add our comments here so we remember what this does. So update ball position. And you notice we use boulder in here. So we'll show you a quick shortcut so we can update these variables. So if we click on boulder and you hold down Control or on a Mac command and you press RR, now we can change this to ball, then hit enter, and it updates all references to this game object. We'll do the same thing for boulder, Control RR, and then we're going to say ball RB for ball rigid body. There we go. No more boulder references. So then we'll add another comment down here. We're going to say remove one life. And to do that, we need to call our GameManager.instance.remove life. And you just put in open and close parentheses, and that will trigger the method. So if we go back to our game manager, if this wasn't return type of void, let's say this was an integer, and we were going to pass in an integer, say I want to remove 2 lives, then in our resetter script, we would pass in a 2 inside of these parentheses. But for right now, we're only ever going to remove 1 life at a time, so we don't need to pass in any variable, and a return type of void is totally okay. Awesome. So we'll save our game manager, we'll save our resetter script. Let's go back to Unity. So if we select our reset zone, you'll notice that we lost our reference to the ball. So unfortunately, when we updated our ball name inside of the script, we did lose the reference. So go ahead and assign the ball by selecting ball in the hierarchy, dragging it into our resetter script so that reference is saved. Now we'll go ahead and hit play. And we're going to miss and see if we get our debug log. There we go. I lost a life. Let's go ahead and stop. We're going to add a couple more debug statements here. So I lost a life. Now inside of our game manager, we said if lives is less than 0, we want to do something. We're also going to do a debug.log. And we're going to say game over, exclamation points. And we're also going to log how many lives the person has. So for right now, if you remember how we add variables and we add interpolation to our string, just add that money symbol right at the start, game over, and we'll say my lives remaining is lives. We're just going to print that out. Awesome. Go ahead and hit play one more time. Now let's see what we get on our console log. I lost a life, I lost a life, I lost a life. There we go. Game over, lives remaining. Keep subtracting -4, -5. Awesome. If you don't see your console log again, just go ahead up to Window, and then under General, you can select Console and get that window to appear again. All right, with our lives properly being removed, let's go ahead and create our UI. We're going to make a very simple UI. Inside of our hierarchy, we're going to right click. We're going to create a UI canvas. We're going to call this UI. Now, over on the right-hand side, we see screen space overlay, which means it's going to overlay our entire screen. We could also overlay the camera, or we could put it in the world space, which is a little more popular for certain UIs in 3D games like health bars as the player's moving around, or gamer tags, etc. Right now, we'll leave it alone as screen space overlay, and we'll do constant pixel size, and everything else is fine for right now. Inside of our UI, we're going to right click and say UI, and we're going to create a panel. Now, you'll notice it's way off our screen here. So make sure you're in 2D mode if for some reason you got toggled off to 3D mode, otherwise it'll look a little weird. We double click on panel, we see we zoomed way out. Now, this looks huge, but if we go back to our game view, we see it's just scaling perfectly to our game view. So for our game over menu, actually, yeah, we'll go ahead and name this one game over. I want the background. We'll change the elf a little bit so it's a little more transparent, but you realize that the game is over. But all right. With our panel game over, inside of it, we're going to add a UI Text Mesh Pro. Text Mesh Pro. Say that 10 times fast. All right. Text Mesh Pro, you're going to get prompted for this window, TMP importer. This is the import all of the fonts and essentials for Text Mesh Pro, which used to be a third-party tool. Now it's a part of Unity. So just go ahead and click Import TMP Essentials. Once that's imported, we can go ahead and zoom in on our text, get it centered here. On the right-hand side with Text Mesh Pro, you get lots of options. So we can center our alignment, put it right in the middle, and we're going to change the text to say, thanks for playing. Maybe at the stop. You can also do new lines, game over. And let's expand this out a little bit. So if you want to expand out both sides when you grab this bar using your rec tool, we can hold down Alt to expand it in both directions after you selected it. Otherwise, you're just going to expand one size at a time. But I want to keep this centered, so I'm going to expand it out like that. We'll do the same to the top. Awesome. If we go back to game view, now we can see game over, thanks for playing. Now we want the ability for the player to reset this game. I'm going to capitalize all of these letters. Thanks for playing. Woo! And in our game over panel, let's go ahead and create a UI by right clicking. And this time we're going to create a button. So we have button Text Mesh Pro. And for our button, we're going to call this retry. And the retry button, use our move tool. We're going to slide this down just a little bit below our game over. If we go back to our game view, we can see there's our button. It's very simple, nothing complex. All right, we can see it's aligned right underneath our text, but it just says button right now. So over on our hierarchy where it says retry, our retry button, there's a child object that automatically gets created with our button when you create one. That's the Text Mesh Pro object again. This one is attached to our button. And this one we'll change to retry. And we can make it bold. And we could also you could change all of the highlight features of the button. So when the user moves their cursor over top of the button over here on the right, we could change that to green. And once it's pressed, it could also be a darker green. And we hit play. Let's see this in action. So put cursor over it. Awesome. Doesn't actually do anything because it's not hooked up to any script, so it doesn't know what to do when we hit the retry button. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so to have a script interact with our game over and our retry functionality, we're just going to make one manager inside of our UI script. We'll call this a UI manager. Again, really simple. We're going to add a component, and it's going to be UI manager. Enter, enter. Now we have a UI manager script. We can select our game over object and turn this off because we don't want our game over to be displayed during the game, only when the game is actually over. In the top right on the inspector, go ahead and click the checkbox next to game over. That will disable our UI. Now our canvas is still there, but our panel for game over is gone. So back on our UI, open up your UI manager script. Go ahead and delete the default methods, then we can create a reference to our game over panel. To create a reference, we'll make another serialized field that will store a game object. In our hierarchy, game over is just a game object. So we can make a game object variable and we can call it game over UI, the lowercase g. Awesome. We'll also make one for a pause menu. We won't make the pause menu right now, but just thinking ahead, it'll be on the to-do list. We'll make a serialized field, game object, pause menu, UI. All right. So what do we want the UI manager to do to display the game over UI? Well, we want it to enable it. So we need a method another script could call, like our game manager. So in our UI manager, we'll make a new method, and this will be public, so that way another script can call it. And it'll be show game over menu. It'll be very descriptive what this method is doing. And this return type is going to be void. We're not returning anything. We're just performing the method and what's going to happen inside the method. Well, we want to take our game over UI and set it active equals true, just like that. Awesome. Now, because we're showing it, maybe later on when the person hits retry, we want to disable it. So we'll also make a public void hide game over menu. Now, there's a couple different ways and reasons why we may or may not use this. So we'll get to that in a minute, but for right now, just to show you, we have two methods, one for showing it and one for hiding it. So we'll do the same. You can actually copy this code, Control C, Control V, paste it down, and change this to false. And this will hide our UI, hide the game over UI. And this will display the game over UI. Awesome. Now let's save our UI manager script and go to Game Manager. And inside of Game Manager, when the game is over, remember we had end game or display game over UI. So now we can call UI manager, but I can't actually get to show, there's no instance. We can't get a reference to this. And now we could make our UI manager another singleton. And so that way it has an instance and we can reference it. But really, the only objects that should be interacting with it is the game manager and maybe the button on the game over resetter when we actually reset the game. So we're just going to make a local reference to our UI manager. And to do that, we'll make another serialized field and we'll call this UI manager and then lowercase UI manager. When we've run out of lives, now we can call UI manager, the lowercase UI that we just created here as a variable, and we'll say dot show game over menu. Awesome. Now back in Unity, after you save your game manager script, we can select our game manager object, and now we have a field where we can drag in our UI manager. By dragging in the game object, it'll automatically get the UI manager script and assign it to that variable. Now we have a reference to our UI manager in our game manager without making this a singleton. Awesome. One more thing we need to do. So our UI manager, we have a game over UI. Now we need to assign it. So again, we're going to assign our game over UI game object. And now with everything assigned, let's go ahead and hit play. And we'll go ahead and miss 1, 2, 3, last life, and the game's over. Awesome. Now again, this button doesn't do anything and I can still play the game because nothing's actually stopping it. So let's go back out and let's fix that. So to make sure the game actually ends and our reset button works, let's open up our UI manager script. And when we show the game over menu, we can pretty much say the game is over. So we could do this in the game manager. I'm going to do it in the UI manager because that means I want to ensure my game over UI is displayed. And then I'm going to set the time scale. A time scale is how fast the game is being played. So right now we're at time scale of 1, which is the normal play mode. We could slow things down to 0.2, but we're going to actually set them to 0 so that way no interactions can happen. So the ball stops moving. So to do that, we're going to say time.timescale equals 0. And if you hit enter, let's add a comment. We'll say pause gameplay. Now we'll save this and let's make one more method. And this will be to reset the game. We'll say public void restart game. So inside of our restart game, we're going to use SceneManager. This is built into Unity's SDK. We do have to import it. We'll get to that in just a second. We're going to say .load scene. Oh, actually, we can see Visual Studio did it automatically, but up at the top. If you do not see this, go ahead and add Unity Engine .SceneManagement so we can utilize scene management inside of our script. All right, so back to load scene, we're going to say SceneManager .get active scene open and close parentheses .name. We want to get the name of the current scene that is open. We'll close our parentheses and we'll end this. So you don't have to do any of this if you know the name of the scene. So for example, I'm just going to copy this real quick. We could say scene 1 or level 1 if we know that this scene is called level 1. Because right now we don't know what the scene is going to be called, and maybe later on we will have more scenes. We'll add additional functions later. For right now, we're just going to get the current scene and restart it. If we go back to Unity and we select our scenes folder, we can see we have a sample scene. That is the name. You'll see it up here at the top. Do not double click on this and hit no. If you do, you're going to lose all of your progress that you just put into the scene. So we're going to hit cancel, make sure we save our scene, and we're good to go. Awesome. So now with our script, and now that we have the restart game method and we've saved our script, we can actually open up our game over UI. We can select our button, the retry button. Over on the right hand side in the inspector, we have this method or this function called onClick. So when the user clicks the button, hit the plus sign, and we want to perform something. So there's a bunch of default options, but what we want to perform is our method inside of our UI script, which is going to load the current scene. So we can select our UI that has our UI manager on it, drag it in, and then open up our function menu, and we're going to select UI manager. You have to search for it here. Show game over menu. No, restart game. There we go. We're going to restart the game. Awesome. So now let's go ahead and hit play, and let's miss. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the game pauses. I can no longer move. Let's hit retry. Awesome. Oh, so we've reloaded the scene, but unfortunately, we did not reset our time scale. So let's back out and fix that. All right, so to fix our scene when we restart and set our timescale back to 1, we can actually call it right before we load the scene again. So right before we load, we're going to do time.timescale equals 1. That way we're back to our original timescale. Now we're going to save this. We're going to hit play again, and we're going to miss it. 1, 2, 3, last life, and it's over. I can't move, and I hit retry, and we're going again. Awesome. Now, you may have noticed I don't have my targets, and that's because I forgot to save the last time I closed out. So let me go ahead and fix that, and we'll get going again. To show you something on these targets, since I'm recreating them, I just want to show you real quick. When we set the size to 2, this is going to fill up, and I have my grid snapping enabled. This is going to fill up and leave no space in between these objects, right? So if I keep making them, you can't see, it doesn't really look like bricks. So to fix that, we can actually do, and if you already have your targets created, you can select all of them and edit these. We're going to set the scale to 1.98 and 0.98. And then we'll create another one. And let's see if our spacing is a little better. All right. Now we can select all of them. Well, we can zoom out, maybe go back to game. It's still really hard to tell. So we can select all of our targets again, and we'll play around with it. 1.9 and 0.9. And go back to game view there. That looks a little nicer. So you can tell these are individual bricks. Personal preference, you could leave them all together, then it gets chipped away, but I like the little block layouts. All right, so change up my colors. Make these guys red. Awesome. That concludes the 6th part of the Beginner Game Dev series. Please reach out to me at sweetandsaltygames@gmail.com and let me know if these videos are too slow or just right. In the next video, we'll add a UI to display our lives and time remaining.